The ancient forest known as the Whispering Pines was a place of deep shadows and older magic, a world where sunlight struggled to pierce the thick canopy of fir and spruce. For Anya, it was not a place of fear, but a sanctuary. Her small, rustic cabin sat at the very edge of the tree line, a deliberate choice that placed her closer to the wild things she loved to photograph. Her life was a quiet one, filled with the patient waiting required to capture a perfect shot of a darting fox or a majestic eagle. She was a student of the forest's moods, and on this particular afternoon, she felt a shift. The air, usually alive with the chatter of birds and the rustle of unseen creatures, had grown heavy and still. A deep, ominous rumble echoed in the distance, a warning that the clear blue sky was about to turn violent. A storm was coming, and it was going to be a fierce one. Most people would have packed their gear and hurried home, but Anya saw a different opportunity. Storms brought out a raw, untamed beauty in the wilderness, and she was determined to capture it. Pulling her rain jacket tight, she ventured deeper into the woods, her camera a familiar weight in her hands. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, splattering against the broad leaves of the undergrowth. Soon, the drizzle became a downpour, and the downpour became a deluge, whipped into a frenzy by a howling wind. The world dissolved into a gray-green haze of driving rain and swaying trees. Anya took shelter under the thick, low-hanging boughs of an ancient cedar, its branches forming a natural canopy. It was there, huddled against the trunk, that she heard it. It wasn't the sound of the wind or the crack of thunder. It was a low, pained whimper, a sound of pure animal distress that cut through the roar of the storm. Her photographer's instinct to observe warred with her human instinct to help. Peering through the curtain of rain, she saw a massive, dark shape struggling near a cluster of lightning-struck pines. Creeping closer, her breath caught in her throat. It was a wolf, but unlike any she had ever seen in books or documentaries. It was enormous, its fur a deep, shadowy silver, now plastered dark and wet against its powerful body. A large tree limb, brought down by the storm's fury, had its back leg pinned cruelly to the muddy ground. With every roll of thunder, the wolf flinched and strained against the weight, but the branch was too heavy, its position too awkward. Anya stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was a creature of pure power, a top predator. One snap of its powerful jaws could end her life. But as she looked into its eyes, she didn't see a mindless beast. Its eyes were a startling, brilliant gold, and they were filled with an intelligence and a pain that was utterly human in its depth. She saw not a monster, but a noble creature in terrible agony. She knew she should be terrified. Every sensible bone in her body told her to back away slowly and leave the forest to its own brutal rules. But the sound of its pained whimpers and the desperate, proud fear in those golden eyes rooted her to the spot. The part of her that could spend hours waiting to capture the perfect moment of life now pushed her to preserve it. She took a slow, cautious step forward. The wolf's head snapped up, a low, warning growl rumbling in its chest, a sound deeper than the thunder. Anya stopped, holding her hands up, showing she held no weapon. "Sure, it's okay," she murmured, her voice a soft, steady counterpoint to the storm's rage. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." She kept talking, a continuous stream of soothing nonsense, about the annoying rain, about how she wished she was back by her warm fire, about how everything was going to be all right. She took another step, and then another, until she was right beside the trapped animal. The smell of wet fur and pine filled her senses. Up close, she could see the strain in its muscles, the way its breath hitched with every small movement. Setting her camera down carefully in a dry spot under a bush, she positioned her feet in the muddy ground and wrapped her hands around the thickest part of the branch. It was wet and rough, covered in bark that scraped her palms. She took a deep breath and pulled with all her might. Her muscles screamed in protest. The branch was impossibly heavy, wedged deep into the earth by the force of its fall. She grunted with the effort, her feet slipping in the mud. For a horrible moment, she thought she wouldn't be able to do it. The wolf let out a soft whine. Gritting her teeth, Anya found a new reserve of strength, pushing with her legs and pulling with her back. With a great, sucking sound, the branch shifted. Just an inch, then 2. Now! She cried out, her voice strained. The wolf seemed to understand. In one fluid, painful-looking motion, it dragged its injured leg out from under the weight. The moment the leg was free, Anya's strength gave out. She fell backward into the mud, the branch settling back into the earth with a thick squelch. She lay there for a second, breathing in ragged gasps, the cold rain washing over her face. She heard a movement and looked up. The wolf was standing now, favoring its injured leg. It took a limping step towards her. Anya held her breath. This was it. Would it thank her, or would the wild instinct to flee from a human take over? The massive creature lowered its head and nudged her hand with its cold, wet nose. Then, it began to gently lick the mud and the scrapes on her palms from the rough branch. A sensation, warm and electric, spread from the point of contact up her arm, flooding her entire body. It was a feeling of connection, of rightness, so powerful it stole her breath. It was as if a missing piece of her soul had suddenly clicked into place. The wolf looked deep into her eyes for one long, silent moment, its golden gaze seeming to imprint itself on her very heart. Then, it turned and, despite its limp, moved with a silent, powerful grace into the shadows of the storm-lashed forest, disappearing as completely as if it had been a dream. Anya sat in the mud for a long time, the cold seeping through her clothes, but a strange, new warmth glowing in her chest. She picked up her camera, its lens speckled with rain. The walk back to her cabin was a blur. The storm was finally easing, but the tempest in her mind was just beginning. She had gone into the forest to capture its wild beauty, and she had the distinct feeling that her own life had just been irrevocably changed. She didn't know how, and she didn't know why, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the wolf with the gold eyes was not gone from her life. Their story, whatever it was, had only just begun. The familiar comforts of Anya's cabin felt strangely distant and hollow in the days that followed the storm. The simple routines that had once defined her life, brewing morning coffee on her wood stove, reviewing the previous day's photographs on her laptop, planning her hikes, now felt like tasks performed by someone else, a ghost going through the motions. Her mind was a constant, swirling reel of that afternoon. The feel of the rough, wet bark under her hands, the shocking intelligence in the wolf's golden eyes, the raw power of its presence, and the shocking, electric warmth that had flooded her when it had licked her hand. It was a feeling that had taken root deep within her, a persistent, humming awareness that her quiet, solitary world had been irrevocably pierced by something ancient, powerful, and dangerously compelling. She felt a restless pull, a constant, quiet draw that kept her gaze constantly drifting toward the dark line of the whispering pines, her heart beating a little faster with a hope she couldn't explain. This new, strange feeling of waiting came to an end on the fourth evening. She was on her porch, sipping tea and watching the fireflies begin their evening dance in the clearing, when a shadow detached itself from the tree line. He moved with a silence that was unnerving, emerging into the fading light not as a wolf, but as a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in simple, dark clothes that seemed both practical and strangely elegant. His hair was the same deep, shadowy silver as the wolf's fur, and his eyes were the exact same shade of brilliant, piercing gold. They were fixed on her with an intensity that made the air leave her lungs. For a long, suspended moment, they simply looked at each other. The humming energy in Anya's blood erupted into a roaring symphony. The warm, tingly feeling from the forest returned, so powerful it made her knees feel weak. It was a feeling of homecoming, of a lock finally finding its key. "My name is Cassian," he said, his voice a low, quiet rumble that seemed to vibrate right through the porch boards and into her very bones. It was the same underlying power she had sensed in the wolf's presence, but softened, shaped into human words. "Anya," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. He gave a single, slow nod. "I owe you a debt. You saved my life." He didn't approach, respecting the boundary of her porch steps. She gestured to the other chair, and he sat, his movements fluid and controlled. He began to speak, and his words painted a new world over the top of her familiar one. He told her of the Silver Fong Pack, a community of people who had lived in the high, hidden valleys of the Whispering Pines for centuries. They were not monsters, he explained patiently, but guardians. The wolf was not a separate beast, it was another part of himself, as fundamental as his own soul. He spoke of a deep connection to the land, of a responsibility to protect the wild heart of the forest from those who would seek to tame or destroy it. It was a truth that should have been unbelievable, yet hearing it from him, seeing the sheer honesty in his golden eyes, it felt more real than anything she had ever known. Then he told her about mates. His voice changed, becoming softer, more reverent, filled with an emotion that made her heart ache. "For my kind," he said, leaning forward slightly, his gaze holding hers, "there is one person, one single soul the world has made perfectly for you. It is a bond that goes deeper than friendship, stronger than any promise. It is a pull in your blood, a song your heart recognizes." His gaze was unwavering, seeing right into the very core of her. "When you stood in the storm, fearless and kind, I felt it. The bond snapped into place for me the moment you touched that branch. You are my mate, Anya." The word hung in the sweet, pine-scented air, immense and profound. It was a word from fairy tales, yet it settled over her not as a fantasy, but as the simple, stunning truth. It was the only thing that could explain the magnetic pull, the deep-seated certainty, the feeling of homecoming that had overwhelmed her in the forest. He had given a name to the emptiness she had felt her whole life, an emptiness she hadn't even known was there until he filled it. A few days later, he asked her to come to his home. There was no fear, only a thrilling, breathless anticipation as she followed him up a path that was invisible to her until he showed it to her. They climbed high into the mountains, the air growing cooler and thinner, until they came to a hidden valley. The village of the Silver Fong Pack was not built on the land, but woven into it. Homes were nestled between the roots of ancient trees, built into the sides of rocky outcroppings, designed to be unseen from the outside world. People moved with a fluid, natural grace, their laughter echoing warmly. They stopped and stared as Cassian led Anya through the center of the village. Their eyes, in various shades of amber and green, held curiosity and a natural wariness. She was an outsider, a human. But when they looked at Cassian, at the protective way his hand rested on the small of her back, their expressions softened into a quiet, respectful acceptance. Their alpha had chosen his mate. The following weeks were a blur of beautiful discovery. Anya spent more and more time in the Pax village, her life becoming a dual existence. Cassian showed her his world. He showed her hidden hot springs where steam rose into the cold mountain air, and meadows of wildflowers that seemed to bloom just for them. They walked for hours, and they talked even longer. He confessed the heavy weight of leading his people, the constant vigilance required to keep them safe and secret. She told him about her nomadic childhood, her dream of putting down roots, her feeling of never truly fitting in anywhere until she found the forest. With every shared secret, every quiet moment, the bond between them strengthened, becoming a tangible, living thing. It was in the way his hand would find hers as they walked, their fingers lacing together perfectly. It was in the long, warm hugs where she could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart against her cheek. It was in the soft, lingering kisses they shared under the canopy of stars, kisses that started out shy and grew in confidence and passion, each one a silent promise, a taste of a forever they both desperately wanted. The air between them crackled with a pure, intense romance, a deep and growing love built on a foundation of utter trust and soul-deep recognition. One evening, they sat on a thick, soft fur spread before a small fire in front of his home. The sky was a deep velvet blue, the first stars glittering like diamonds. The sounds of the pack settling in for the night, the soft murmur of voices, the distant howl of a wolf on patrol, was a comforting melody. Anya leaned back against Cassian's chest, his strong arms wrapped around her, his chin resting on top of her head. She had never felt so safe, so completely and perfectly content. He shifted slightly, turning her in his arms so he could look into her eyes. The firelight danced in his golden gaze, which was filled with a love so deep it made her breath catch. "My soul," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "recognized yours, Anya. From the very beginning of time, I think it was searching. And now that I've found you, it will never let you go. It will always, always find you." He wasn't asking a question. He was stating a fact as undeniable as the mountains around them. It was a confession, a vow, and a declaration of a love that was written in the stars. Anya looked at him, at the man who was also a wolf, her protector, her other half, and she knew. She knew with every fiber of her being that her own soul had been searching for his, too. "I know," she whispered back, her voice thick with unshed tears of joy. "My soul is yours. It's finally home." The golden, sun-drenched days that followed were the most profoundly fulfilling of Anya's life. Her world had beautifully, impossibly, split into two equally precious halves. By day, she was still the wildlife photographer of the Whispering Pines, her camera capturing the delicate dance of light through leaves and the secret lives of the forest creatures. But her true home, the part of her that felt most alive, was in the hidden valleys with the Silver Fang pack. Her connection with Cassian deepened into something unshakable and mature. It was in the easy silence they shared, a language all their own. It was in the protective way his hand would rest on her waist, a constant, warm pressure that told her she was safe. It was in the slow, tender kisses they exchanged in the quiet moments, kisses that spoke of a deep, abiding passion and a love that was growing roots, anchoring them together for a lifetime. The bond between them was no longer a strange, new feeling. It was the very core of her existence, the steady hum that gave music to her every day. But the peace of the mountains was a fragile thing. A subtle tension began to creep into the high valleys, a change felt not with the ears, but with the instincts. The birds were quieter. The normal, bustling activity of the forest creatures grew more cautious. Cassian became more watchful, his posture often rigid, his brilliant gaze constantly scanning the tree line. The relaxed man who held her at night was now often in deep, hushed conversations with his most trusted warriors, their faces etched with grim concern. The threat, when he finally explained it to her, was all too human. A development company had discovered the mineral-rich slopes of the Whispering Pines. They saw not a sacred home, but a resource to be exploited. Survey teams with loud, rumbling machines and maps that dismissed the ancient forests as empty space were pressing deeper into pack territory, threatening to tear the heart out of their world. A cold dread settled in Anya's stomach, colder than the highest mountain stream. The safe haven she had found was in peril. Her fear was a sharp, physical pain, not for herself, but for Cassian, for the pack, for the children who played as puppies in the sun-dappled clearings. Cassian and his warriors devised a plan to scare the intruders away, to use their wolf forms to create the illusion of a dangerously large predator population, hoping to make the mountains seem too volatile for profit. It was a dangerous game, a delicate dance of threat and retreat that required perfect timing and carried the constant risk of discovery or injury. The morning the warriors left, the village was blanketed in a heavy, anxious silence. Cassian stood before Anya, his hands cradling her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. His eyes were pools of fierce determination and unwavering love. "You must stay in the heart of the village," he said, his voice low and firm. "Do not go near the borders. The men with the machines do not understand what they are trespassing on. Promise me you will be safe." Anya could only nod, her throat too tight for words. She pressed a small, smooth stone she had found with him on one of their first walks into his palm. He closed his fingers around it, his expression softening for a fleeting second before he leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss filled with all the love and fear and desperate hope that swirled around them. Then he was gone, shifting into his powerful wolf form and leading his warriors into the depths of the forest, leaving behind a void of waiting. The hours stretched, thin and torturous. Anya stayed with the elders, trying to help with daily chores, but her mind was with Cassian in the woods. The not knowing was agony. Driven by a need to feel closer to him, to perhaps catch a glimpse or a sound from a higher vantage point, she made a fateful mistake. She broke her promise. Slipping away from the central clearing, she moved quietly toward the eastern ridge, the direction he had gone. It was a terrible error in judgment. The development company, wary of the strange wolf activity, had hired hunters as security. And while Cassian's plan was drawing the main survey team away, one of these hunters, a grim-faced man with a cold gaze, had been left to guard the perimeter. He saw Anya, a human girl alone where no one should be, and saw an opportunity. He moved with a predator's silence, grabbing her from behind, a thick, calloused hand clamping over her mouth. "Well, what do we have here?" he grunted, his breath hot on her neck. "A little scout for the animals? You're going to tell me all about these wolves?" Pure, icy terror seized her. She struggled, but his grip was like iron. In her panic, she did the only thing she could. She screamed for Cassian not with her voice, but with her soul, throwing a desperate, silent cry down the bond that connected them, a raw signal of pure fear. "Cassian!" The response was instantaneous. A roar of pure, undiluted fury erupted from the forest, a sound so primal it seemed to shake the very rocks under their feet. The hunter froze, his grip slackening for a crucial second. From the trees, a blur of dark fur and immense power launched itself into the clearing. It was Cassian, but Anya had never seen him like this. This was the alpha of the Silver Fang pack, a force of nature unleashed. Every muscle was coiled with lethal intent, his lips pulled back from gleaming fangs in a snarl that promised violence, his gold-flecked eyes burning with a feral, protective rage. He moved faster than thought, a storm of teeth and fury. He didn't kill the man, but he disarmed him and disabled him with brutal, efficient force, sending him crashing to the ground with a cry of pain before turning his blazing gaze on the man, a clear, unspoken threat. The hunter, faced with this raw, unstoppable power, scrambled backward, then turned and fled into the forest, his bravado completely shattered. The moment the man was gone, the great wolf turned. The fury in his eyes vanished, replaced by a desperate, shaking concern. He shifted back in a fluid motion, his only thought for her. He was at her side in an instant, his hands running over her arms, her face, checking for any harm. "You're safe. I've got you," he whispered, his voice hoarse, pulling her into a crushing embrace. She clung to him, her whole body trembling, burying her face in his chest, the solid, steady beat of his heart calming her own frantic one. He had felt her terror across the distance. He had come for her. In the quiet aftermath, as the pack ensured the hunters and surveyors had truly retreated, the reality of the choice she had to make settled over Anya. She stood with Cassian on a high ledge overlooking his village, the one that had become her second home. The wind tugged at her hair, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. He held both her hands in his touch gentle but his expression solemn. "You have a life beyond these mountains," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "A life of your own making, with your art and your freedom. My life is here, bound to this land and this pack. It will always hold danger. The choice of where you belong, it has to be yours, Anya. I will love you no matter what you decide." Anya looked out at the majestic, wild beauty of the mountains. She thought of her small, tidy cabin and her life of solitary wonder. Then she thought of the vibrant, loving community of the pack, the profound connection she felt to this land, and the man standing before her. She saw her past, her present, and her entire future in his golden eyes. She squeezed his hands, her own decision crystal clear, a truth she had known in her soul for a long time. "My heart is not a place on a map, Cassian," she said, her voice clear and strong, filled with a love that would never waver. "It stopped being a place the moment I found you in the storm. My heart is your home. And I am yours. I choose you. I choose us." The relief and joy that transformed his face was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. He pulled her close, and their lips met in a kiss that was deeper and more profound than any they had shared before. It was a kiss of promise, of a future chosen and embraced, a seal on a bond that had been tested by fear and forged in unwavering love. And as Anya stood there, wrapped in the arms of her wolf, her mate, high in the mountains they would protect together, she knew her greatest adventure was only just beginning. If you were swept away by Anya and Cassian's story of fearless love and magical destiny, there are so many more tales waiting to be told in the Whispering Woods. To discover the next chapter in their journey, and to lose yourself in other worlds where love conquers all, be sure to subscribe. Your next favorite adventure is just a click away.